Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the Caserna show. Hope you guys are doing good today. So, today we are going to be talking about the new Looney Tunes movie and also the potential possibility of a Who Framed Roger Rabbit 2, or more of like what could be or what could have been. But it's kind of interesting because Looney Tunes and Roger Rabbit are somewhat kind of tied together because, Looney Tunes was a pretty big part of Roger Rabbit. But it's kind of fascinating where the state of Looney Tunes is today because I wouldn't say that Looney Tunes is a dead IP. I mean, it's far from being a dead IP, but it's not a prominent IP. Like the characters are iconic. Like everybody knows who Bugs Bunny is, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Elmer Fudd, Sylvester, Tweety Bird. Like the characters are still iconic and are still popular. People still know who they are. Like matter of fact, Bugs Bunny was in that Multiverses game that died a few months ago. So like the characters are still iconic. But like as far as a property, pretty much it's just there. Like, I mean, I think they still make the Looney Tunes show, like a modern Looney Tunes show, but next to nobody watches it. And also, it seems like Warner Brothers' handling of the Looney Tunes IP has just been, and not it doesn't seem that way. It has been fucking abysmal between canceling the Coyote versus Acme movie, then apparently, so I didn't even know till I watched the Looney Tunes the day the Earth blew up that movie actually wasn't released by Warner Brothers. It was bought by Ketchup Studios, who is the same studio that just bought Coyote versus Acme. So Warner Brothers technically didn't even release the last two Looney Tunes movies. They were pretty much Warner Brothers movies, which is fucking wild because Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes are like Disney and Mickey Mouse. I mean, it'd be like if a third party was making Donald Duck, Goofy, Mickey Mouse shorts and movies, and Disney was not doing that. Like that would be damn near unimaginable. And the fact that Warner Brothers just seems to not give a fuck about Looney Tunes is crazy because, like, it is, I think, probably one of, if not their longest running series. Like I said, the characters are still iconic. They've been around for nearly 100 years. And the franchise has just kind of been existing. Like, it seems like there really hasn't been any direction or even like an interest really about what to do with Looney Tunes. I mean, they had Space Jam 2 that came out a few years ago, which was, you know, pretty much not even a movie. It was more of just an advertisement for all the different types of streaming services and all the different types of, IPs and shows that they have on like HBO Max and shit. So that wasn't even really a movie. It was more just like an advertisement for subscribing to HBO Max and watching all their different type of shows and showing off their catalog of IPs and properties that they own. So I mean, it was a movie, but not really. I mean, it was just more of a commercial for other shit than the Looney Tunes. So yeah, I mean, besides the Space Jam 2, like most people know Space Jam 1 that came out back, was it in the 90s? I think it was early 2000. No, it was 90s. I think it was the 90s when the first Space Jam came out. And then the last before Space Jam 2, we had the Looney Tunes Back in Action, which was the Brendan Fraser movie. And that pretty much was a box office bomb. No one went to go see it. The production was chaotic, so that movie was a flop. And besides those movies, besides the two Space Jams, and besides Back in Action, and those movies like are spread apart over about 20 years. So over 20 years, there's been three movies, and one pretty much nobody went to go see. It was a bomb, and Space Jam 2 was just pretty much a commercial. Space Jam 1, was a pretty. I wouldn't say it was a well received movie by the fans, but not so much like critically. I mean, it is what it is. Like, when you go back and watch it, it is a pretty just '90s Michael Jordan vehicle of Looney Tunes. Yeah, there's not much. It's nothing comparable to like a Roger Rabbit film. So yeah, like it's interesting seeing how the state of Looney Tunes is in 2025 because especially now, like the whole talk about Coyote versus Acme, which went on for a year, and Warner Brothers had pretty much no interest in trying to release that movie and ended up selling it to a third party. Like to me, that's just crazy that Warner Brothers has that little like respect or even interest in one of their legacy IPs. I feel like Warner Brothers should be very interested in doing everything they can to make as much Looney Tunes projects as possible and also be very protective of it. Like, to where they want to be the ones to make and release anything Looney Tunes. Like, they don't want anyone to release anything non Looney Tunes. Because, like, again, like, I cannot imagine. I mean, granted, Disney is a lot bigger than Warner Bros., but I could not imagine, even if Disney was not the encompassing, monopoly that is today, I cannot imagine a point, even maybe at its desperate, maybe like when it was at its most absolutely like desperate point, maybe that they would think about having a movie that was a Donald Duck movie or a Goofy movie or even like a Pluto movie and selling that to another studio for them to release it. I cannot imagine Disney doing that. And it seems like Zaslav just does not have any interest in making much of Looney Tunes. Like, it's just kind of there. But it's kind of funny because they've announced that they're going to be making a new Looney Tunes movie, which to me is fucking comical considering how they have handled the last two Looney Tunes movies. I don't see why they would at this point. Like, I would like to see a lot more Looney Tunes movies, but I don't see why Warner Brothers would even consider doing that because they don't seem to be interested in making any type of Looney Tunes movies or shows. Like, I mean, the shows seem to be kind of doing okay because I do think that they do have new Looney Tunes, but I haven't seen the modern Looney Tunes in pretty much ever, so I can't speak to that. But it's just so strange to me how Warner Brothers just has such little care or respect for like one of their most iconic IPs, which is an endless cash cow. I mean, all the studios, I mean, they've always been that way, but if you want to make profit and you want to make money, Looney Tunes, there's tons of stuff you can do with it. There's tons of movies. The character catalog is endless. And so the thing about Looney Tunes, The Day the Earth Blew Up, I didn't even realize this, but this is the first actual fully animated Looney Tunes movie. And I thought that that wasn't true, but when I thought about it, it is true because there have been technical Looney Tunes movies, quote unquote, but they weren't movies. Back in the 70s and the 80s, there were Looney Tunes movies, but they were more of short films or short stories that were added into a full feature film. So it wasn't actually a cohesive full feature film. And then outside of that, the Looney Tunes haven't really been in many films. They were, cameos in Roger Rabbit, and then they've had a lot. Weirdly enough, they've had a lot of live action films. They've been in a lot of live action projects, but rarely have they been in a lot of animated films, which is strange because Looney Tunes is one of the oldest animated series or properties. And they have had more live action projects and movies, and they've had actual animated movies and shows. Well, no, not shows. They've had more probably. I don't think they've had a live action show, which actually that could be interesting. That if they pulled it off right, they could make a pretty good live action Looney Tunes TV series. But that's here or there. But the fact that in 2025, after about like what 90 years the Looney Tunes have been around, it's taken that long for there to be a full feature animated film is just fucking crazy. But the good thing is, I'm happy to say after watching it, it is a phenomenal movie. I really like this movie. And what's so interesting and so what's so strange about this movie is that it's a strictly Porky Pig, Daffy Duck movie. There are no other Looney Tunes. There are zero other Looney Tunes. They are not mentioned. They are not seen. They're not heard. I don't even think that anyone besides Porky Pig and Daffy Duck actually exists as far as Looney Tunes. Because I kept expecting that there was going to be a cameo or a photo or an Easter egg or a post-credit scene, and there's just nothing. This is just a strictly buddy comedy with Porky Pig and Daffy Duck, and that's it. And I think that's actually kind of fascinating that Warner Bros., as much as I've been trashing them for how they've handled how they've handled Looney Tunes, I will say I'm actually impressed that they allowed for that to happen, that they allowed for a Looney Tunes movie to be made without having Bugs Bunny and all the other characters crammed in there. Because normally a studio, especially nowadays, would want to have a ton of Easter eggs, ton of cameos, after credits for set up for a Bugs Bunny movie and the Elmer Fudd movie and the Foghorn movie. But no, they let the filmmakers just make their movie. They let them do it their way, and I will have to give them credit for that. That they actually allowed for that to happen. And also another thing I liked about the movie is that it has a very has like a very classic 1940s 50s and that kind of old Looney Tunes animation aesthetic to it. It doesn't look like a highly polished 2025 animated movie. It looks like a Looney Tunes movie that could have came out in the 70s and the 80s. And I like that. I like that it has this kind of callback to the old Looney Tunes. Like really this whole movie was a love letter to classic Looney Tunes. And it's just strange in a way that with how poorly handled that the series has been, that they actually was able to make this film is kind of interesting. And also that it got released because, we know what happened with, Coyote versus Acme. The fact that it got released too is interesting. But I also like the film because it just has that very like kind of classic like Saturday morning cartoon feel to it. The plot makes no sense. Like the plot's just completely fucking ridiculous. But it's a Looney Tunes movie. It's not going to make the most cohesive sense, but it's a movie. Although it's a movie that has a nonsensical plot with a villain that has makes no sense for their motives. It does actually have some depth to it as far as like the relationship between Porky Pig and Daffy Duck about how Daffy's always the one getting into trouble, always doing shit that causes shit to be worse, and Porky Pig's like the straight man who's always trying to do right, always trying to be cautious, and Daffy Duck's always causing shit to go wrong, and they're having to try to like make those two dynamics work. With Porky Pig at some point it's just like, you know what, fuck it, maybe we're not supposed to be, like together as friends or as a team because you keep fucking shit up. I keep trying to make things work, and it just doesn't seem like we're working out. So there is some depth to it as far as the relationships and the characters, even though it's in a ridiculous concept. And to be able to pull that off is fascinating. So yeah, I would strongly recommend if you haven't seen this movie. Matter of fact, it's on Amazon now for I think you can rent it for $9, possibly about 5 by the time you listen to this, because it was on discount when I bought it or rented, which was like $9. And I think it actually comes out officially on digital, like when it is that you can rent it for cheap. I think it comes out like in a week or two. But I would strongly recommend watching this movie because it's just an enjoyable movie. It's not a movie that takes itself too seriously. It's not too crazy and ridiculous to where it's just out there enough that you just want to turn off and you're like, yeah, this is fucking stupid. It has just that right amount, no pun intended, of looniness to it where you can watch it, enjoy it. It's nice. And the only downside is I don't know how well this movie did because there was no fucking advertisement for this movie. I mean, pretty much next to none. This movie, I don't think Warner Brothers had any type of promotion because this movie was actually released last year, I think in the summertime, because I remember hearing about this movie last year, and it was released in film festivals, but it wasn't, you know, for like the broader audiences. It was only for film festivals, and then it was going to be released initially February of this year, and then it got moved back to being released in March. And I was like, "Fuck, man, this movie's never going to come out. It just keeps getting pushed back." It was out last year and it was going to come out February, and then it was March. And I thought this movie's just going to be always getting delayed or some shit. Because after what happened with Coyote versus Acme, I thought there was a solid chance this movie just would keep getting pushed back or just indefinitely delayed for a public release. So I was like, this movie might not actually come out for people to watch. But luckily, it did come out. Now I did miss it when it came to theaters, but I was able to catch it when it came to digital, and I enjoyed it. I think it was definitely worth the wait, and I would strongly recommend that people watch it because it's a pretty good movie, and it's a very good Looney Tunes movie. Like if you're a person who's big into classic animation, or you're just a big fan of like classic, Looney Tunes, it's perfect. I think you'll definitely love it. But speaking of movies, and speaking about movies that might not come out or will never be released, I started thinking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit too, which kind of ties in, like I was saying earlier, to Looney Tunes. And it's there's been talk for, I mean, really since the first movie came out about a Roger Rabbit 2 being made, and I don't know how I feel about that because I Roger Rabbit is in my top 5 favorite films. I love that film. I can watch that endlessly. And I love the concept of Roger Rabbit too, but I don't like what it would probably become because I don't know if in 2025 the amount of work and the amount of love and passion that got put into the first one would be translated into a second one. And I also don't know if Disney would be wanting to put the amount of work into a second one that the first one did. And I feel like they also would take away the wrong lessons from the first one. Because the first movie, when you really think about it, even though it has to this day some of the most iconic characters in animated history and also just iconic characters, in fiction. Bugs Bunny, you got Mickey Mouse. That to this day, the only time that Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny have actually crossed over was in Roger Rabbit. Even though it has all of these iconic characters from Daffy Duck, Donald Duck, it's not even about them. They're there. They show up. The other characters like Dumbo show up, and other characters like Bambi, Snow White, the dwarves, Foghorn Leghorn. They're there, but they're just kind of as cameos. They show up and they don't take away from the story. They don't take up too much time. They don't just show up. So they're like, "Hey, look who we got in this movie." They organically fit in the movie. And I feel like today, especially with how massive the Disney because that's the thing that the Disney catalog has grown insanely massive since this movie came out. There are so many characters that did not exist when the first one came out that exist today. And I feel like now Disney would just try to cram every fucking character they have in this movie. It would just end up being like a Space Jam 2 where it's just every character's there for no reason. They serve no plot reason, and they're just there to be there. And so I think that they would take the wrong lessons from first ones like, oh, look at all these characters we got. Look at fucking Elsa and Moana and all these characters. And it just like they're just there taking up time like a beast for the story. And they just be there purely for fan service. They'd serve no reason. And the movie would probably be like 3 hours long. They'd probably get some generic actor who's famous right now, like Tom Holland or some shit, or Chris Pratt. They'd probably get like a Chris Pratt or a Tom Holland who's purely only there not because they're the best for the job, but because they have marketability and they're a famous A-list actor right now. So they'd probably just be slotted in there. Jessica Rabbit would probably be removed or completely redone and completely take away the original point of her character. And so I feel, and also one of the main things that made that movie so amazing and still stands up today is the animation. I just don't feel like Disney today, especially since they have pretty much eradicated their animation department. I can't remember what movie it was, but I want to say it was the recent Mary Poppins, which came out a few years ago, and it had some live action sequences. I might be that might even be the right movie, but there was a movie that came out that either was trying to use Disney Animation Studios or was gonna try or like either tried or did and they couldn't because they had such a reduced department that it just wasn't possible. And really for the last 15 to 20 years Disney has pretty gradually, not even gradually, pretty fucking rapidly reduced their animation department. Nowadays it's mostly 3D animation, AI, so they're not really prioritizing animation anymore. And I don't think that they would have that type of care and passion. Because if you look at the behind the scenes of Roger Rabbit, and I strongly recommend that if you're a big fan or if you're just a fan of this film, to look at the behind the scenes, like the amount of time and effort that went into it, from the puppeteering to the referencing to having mimes and mimics, like all the detail that went into making the animation what it is. That's why it stands up now because they put so much work and effort into it. You had animators that were really passionate about this film, making the animation as good as it can. They also had a director, and Robert Zemeckis, who also was really passionate about making this movie as perfect as possible and making this blend work as possible, like as good as possible. And I just don't know if they would have that today. I feel like now they would just slap some cheap hybrid 3D 2D animation. It'd probably be maybe at best somewhat okayly adapted. Like it might be like adapted to where it looks okay in live action, but nothing like the original. Like I feel like even with as much advancements in technology as we've had, I feel like a new Roger Rabbit movie would end up looking worse than the first one, just because they would not be interested in putting the amount of time into making the animation work. I think they'd want to spend at best like a year or two making this and toss it out for Disney Plus or for a theatrical release and call it a day. Yeah, because I kind of look at that recent Chip and Dale movie that came out a year or two ago, and that movie wasn't bad. But I think that that's a good indication about how they would look at or how they would probably go about making a Roger Rabbit 2. And I just think that that is nothing like what Roger Rabbit was about. Like it was an homage to these classic 40s, 50s animation, animated series and, animation icons. And I just don't think that they have that now. And I don't know who they'd even have to direct it because Zemeckis has talked about a Roger Rabbit 2 over the years, but he has said that there's a script that I don't know who wrote it, but he said there's a script out there that Disney has that they're not interested in making. And also, I don't know, Zemeckis is interesting because he's made some of the most iconic films in the last 100 years. I mean, really, just in general. Um, and he's had a pretty spotty track record. I mean, his recent movie here, I think it was the one where he de-aged Tom Hanks and forgot her name, the one from House of Cards. That wasn't too poorly received. That was poorly received. And then he had a few other like the Polar Express, and then a few others that weren't received well. Like he's had a very shoddy record, and also I just don't think that Disney would hire him. I don't think they have any interest in bringing Zemeckis back if they do make it. But I don't know who they would bring back. I don't know who they would bring on for this, or who they well, and also they couldn't really bring back a lot of people because a lot of people who worked on this film are dead. Like the behind the scenes people, like a lot of the animators, they passed away, and then like Bob Hoskins? Yeah, Bob Hoskins. He passed away. And so, really, most of the cast, besides the voice actor for Roger Rabbit, he's still around, and then the voice actress for Jessica Rabbit, she's still around. Besides a handful of people, there's not a lot of people still around from that movie when you really think about it. I mean, even some of the voice actors, like Mel Blanc, he passed away. I forget his name, but the guy who voices Donald Duck, he's still around. Matter of fact, the guy who voiced Donald and Roger Rabbit, actually still to this day, he's voiced Donald since then, so he's still around. So they'd have to get a lot of new people, new animators, new actors, new characters, and I'm just very apprehensive about how they would go about that. But I feel like if they got the right director who was passionate about making a homage sequel to the first one, I think that they could. But also, they would also have to be a director that has some type of power, like status. Because I don't think you could just get a regular director to direct this film because they would just get walked on. Like, I mean, they just have to do whatever Disney told them to. But if they had somebody that was kind of some stature, they might be able to have their own input. But then again, Tim Burton has talked about how he did not like working for Disney, so even then that might not be that might even work then. But then also there's the other problem with this movie, and this has been an issue trying to make a sequel for a while now, is the legal rights because Steven Spielberg was pretty critical in brokering the deal between Warner Brothers and Disney to making them like not allowing it, but like making this partnership work. And I don't know nowadays, I don't know how that would work with Warner Brothers and Disney. I just don't know if they would be willing to come to a partnership for a movie like this for a second one. Because I believe that Disney owns the rights to Roger Rabbit and Jessica Rabbit. But all the other, and I think Ben DeKalb he's original character, so I think Disney owns him too. But the majority of the characters that are not Disney are strictly, Fleischer Studios and Warner Brothers. So they'd have to come to some deal, and that would be a whole other issue. So there's a few challenges when it comes to a Roger Rabbit movie, and I think also that's partly why it hasn't been made. It's because there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of layered issues to trying to make a second one. That I think that Disney's just like, yeah, this ain't worth it. Warner Bros. Is like, it ain't worth it either, and they've just kind of gone about their day. pretty much. And also, I think that in this day and age, I don't think that one of the appeals of this movie would work nowadays as much, like the whole crossover. Because back then, back when the first one came out, the idea of seeing Donald Duck and Daffy Duck together was just that was just fucking mind blowing that you have these two iconic characters. But nowadays, I mean, we live in an era of crossover from, Avengers crossing over different characters. You have games that cross over. There are several different series like Multiverses, the video game had different crossovers. Like, I mean, nowadays crossovers are everywhere to where people are kind of tired of seeing characters crossing over. So I don't even think the appeal of seeing Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse today, I mean, it would be cool, but I don't think you would have the same type of reaction or impact it did back when it happened back in the day. Because we're just so used to seeing that now. We're so used to seeing, I mean, fucking Mickey Mouse has crossed over with Final Fantasy characters at this point. So, like, it's to the point now where seeing characters from different IPs and different franchises crossing over just really doesn't have the same type of impact like it used to. Yeah, I think it just kind of be looked at as like, oh, that's kind of cool, but it's like, whatever. So there is that issue. And then there's also the other problem of Jessica Rabbit, who, admittedly, I do agree. I think she probably would be completely overhauled for a new movie. Because, in fact, there's a ride that she's a part of. They changed her to being like a detective, where now she has like a coat, like this brown trench coat and a hat. And she's, not in the sexy red dress showing the cleavage. Like, she's more of a, I won't say like a modern female character. I don't like that term, but she's definitely been watered down from what she was in the first film. And I think also like the whole idea of like trying to have to modernize Jessica Rabbit. I think it's ridiculous because the original Jessica Rabbit, she didn't have not I mean not a lot of depth to her, but she did have some to her. Like, I mean, yeah, she was this sexy bombshell animated character, but she wasn't like just the general like damsel in distress. Like, if you think about it, she was the one doing a lot of shit. Like she was the one that was like dealing with Arcade Maroon. She was the one that was like having to help Roger. She was the one having to help Valiant. She was a pretty like active character in that film. Like, she was the one doing more of the saving and helping than most of the characters was. And also, she kind of had the twist of like she wasn't just like a simplistic, a hot chick who just was wanting to hook up with some hot character. She liked Roger because he made her laugh. You know, she liked him even though he was just goofy, annoying rabbit that most people hated. She was like, I like him because he makes me laugh. She was more interested in him for his character than like what he looked like or anything else. She was more interested in him, which I think, considering a character like Roger Rabbit, that's pretty different. So I do think that Jessica Rabbit, she would certainly be changed from what she was in the first film. And there'd also be the question of who would be the live action actor. And like I said earlier, I don't think that they would choose someone who is well fit for the job. Like, I think they would just slot in like a Chris Pratt or a Tom Holland, whoever's the default generic Hollywood guy right now. Who's, even if he's younger, or older, they'd probably younger. I'd say now, just for audiences. So they'd probably get like Tom Holland or some shit like that. And really, I don't think they'd put much thought into like what their character would be. They'd just be kind of there to be there. But I will say, for as much as I am not against per se having a second movie, but I don't have hopes for if it ever got made to being a good movie. I think that there's one aspect of the first one that if they expanded on it could be pretty cool, which is the concept of Toontown. In the first movie, Toontown was there, but we really didn't get to see a lot of Toontown. And I think nowadays, especially like with the catalog, how massive the animated catalog is, because one thing that's not really kind of realized about Roger Rabbit is that when that movie came out, that so many characters from The Simpsons, from SpongeBob, from even like the modern Disney characters like Elsa, Moana, Simba, Aladdin, Jafar. all of them, they did not exist when the first one came out. So there's a ton of characters that exist now that weren't around back then. And you could do a lot with that. You could do almost like what was that show on Disney? I think it was House of Mouse, where it had like the crossover of all the villains and the heroes from the different shows and movies that like come together for like a dinner at that like theater. There's so much you could do with that. I think if they did it right, they could do a pretty cool like expansion of Toontown, where they like go into like the politics and the inner workings of Toontown. So that'd be kind of cool. So I mean, I do think that there are things that they could do with a Roger Rabbit too, and there's a lot of interesting concepts. I think, like also you could like kind of make it like a more modern take on it, like where instead of it being set like back when the first one was, like it's actually kind of been set closer to like the modern day, like the 90s or 80s, and you have this whole new catalog of characters that weren't around for the first movie that you could use now. So there are some things that they could do with it, but again, just seeing the trend of sequels and remakes and reboots, and also just seeing Disney's lack of interest in animation for the last 20 years, I just don't think that it's probably. I don't think it's probably a good idea for this movie to get made. Like I think it's probably always going to be a good idea just to have an idea of what this movie could have been, or just like a concept opposed to what could be, because I don't think at this point that it would be anything nearly as good as the first one. I think it. Funny enough, I think if they made a second one, it would probably age quicker and worse than the first one, because the first one still holds up perfectly. The animation still holds up. The story still holds up. The movie's just an overall fantastic movie. And I don't think if they made a second one that within 5 years it would even hold up if for that long. I think in 3 years it'd fucking age like milk in the summertime. But yeah, those are just my thoughts on Looney Tunes and Roger Rabbit too, because animation's kind of one of those things that's in a weird. Now I wouldn't say animation in general, but like certain types of animation, especially like classic 2D animations, like kind of like a dying, not dying art, but it's not as prominent now. Like you have like Cuphead, the game that kind of is like an homage to classic animation, but there's not like a lot of that type, like the old Disney Looney Tunes types of animation around. So I don't think that that would really be something that would be brought back for this. Now, I will say, with that, that would be kind of cool to have like a Cuphead style, like Roger Rabbit series. Then I see that would be, I would be interested in that, like a Cuphead style Roger Rabbit crossover. Now, see, that would be fun if Studio MDHR was able to somehow use like Disney characters and Looney Tunes characters for a Cuphead style game. That would be fucking phenomenal. It'd be rage inducing and fucking take 100 tries to get through a boss, but I think it'd be worth. I think it'd be worth the fucking increased blood pressure and rage induced frenzies. But with that said, I think I'm going to call it a day here and appreciate you guys for stopping by. And until next time, I will see you guys then.